Welcome to the Think Factory podcast. We got one question for you. What keeps you up at night?
I'm your host, Chris Santomassimo, and I'm excited to sit down today with Joe Upton. Joe is the Vice President of Business Development at Gasch Printing, which is based in Odenton, Maryland. So welcome to the podcast, Joe.
Well, thank you for having me, Chris. Enjoy this opportunity to visit with you.
Yeah, it's terrific. I had the pleasure of sitting down with you and breaking bread at the Book Manufacturers Institute meeting earlier this week. For those that aren't familiar with BMI is a great organization of book printers, publishers, and suppliers to that industry. Joe is one of the members, as am I, and just it was nice to be able to take a pulse on what's going on with the printing industry as it applies to books, of course, just to see what folks are talking about in the market dynamics.
Yeah, it's the BMI is a pretty neat organization, and I'm not sure I've been a part of one that is similar to it, because it's the book industry is not a big industry. So there were about 100 people at that meeting, a split between book printers and our suppliers. And it's a very collegial, as you commented, it's a very collegial group, very open. Even though there are many competitors on both sides of the on the supplier side and on the printer side, but I think everybody views that if we're open and honest with what's going on in the market, what we're seeing, the challenges we faced, we're better off as a group, working as a group, as opposed to trying to knock each other's brains out.
It's absolutely true. What's interesting about the industry too, and I think the attendance at the meeting represents this a little bit, is that you've got some really big players, and then you've got smaller ones and folks in the middle, but they all sort of swim together in an effort to preserve themselves, as you said.
Yes, yeah. I mean, we have the top executives from CJK and Lakeside, sitting next to the top executives of companies like Gasch, and operating as peers. There's really no differentiation by size.
I was sort of joking with the Thomson Reuters folks who own Westlaw and West Publishing, and I think I spent quite a bit of money with those folks back in the day when I was a law student. So it's finally nice to meet the people who took my money.
Well, I hope they bought you a drink.
They did, as a matter of fact. So it did work out. Hey, but Joe, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you and how you came up in the industry, and certainly what's going on at Gasch. Some of the things that you're doing for your customers, and some of the ways that the industry is blossoming in some respects and staying stable in others. So take it away.
Well, so I was, for all practical purposes, born into the industry. I spent most of my career at a company named Malloy. Originally, we were Malloy Lithographing in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It was a business my father built up. And when I got out of college in the 80s, I went into the business. My brother was in the business. And we were entirely offset printing. So our average print run was about 4,000 copies. And for, better part of 15 years, that was a great, things were going very, very well. And then the internet came along, and it just, for reasons people all understand, there's been, the book is not going away, but it certainly has declined in terms of its utilization. But I enjoyed my time there. We ended up, I was always on the sales side of the business. We merged with a company named Edwards Brothers, which is one of the oldest book printers in the United States. And that was in 2012. And unfortunately, the merger didn't work well, and that company disappeared 6 years later. Along the way, I left, and I was fortunate enough to land at Gasch in 2020. And it's kind of interesting because for the first 25 plus years in the industry, I was on the offset side, and Gasch is an all digital printer. So whereas at Malloy, our average print run was 4,000, at Gasch, it's about 400. But we serve the same types of customers. It's a mix of trade associations, trade publishers, the kind of people that publish books that are sold in bookstores, and academic, higher education, elementary, high school. And the core needs have not changed. Publishers are looking for reliable quality, which most printers can deliver, some a little more consistently than others, but most printers deliver that. On-time delivery, and that changes depending on demand relative to capacity. Or schedules change, not necessarily reliability. And then price. But I think the big thing that has changed, and where I think a company like Gasch is in a good position, is say 15 years ago, publishers wouldn't think of printing fewer than 1,000 copies. That was kind of an exception. And there were issues about quality regarding with equipment. Digital printing equipment at the time wasn't quite as good as they didn't produce quite as good an image as offset. But that differentiation has pretty much changed. And then the unit cost issue, the inkjet presses like what we have at Gasch can produce 400 or 500 copies at a fairly reasonable cost compared to what we did 15 years ago. And as a result, publishers can maintain lower inventory levels, helps their balance sheet, and respond more nimbly to the market.
Yeah, that's really been the change, the huge change in the market, is to be able to go from these long run prints using offset technology to digital, as you said. And there is certainly a value to publishers and to sellers where they can not only reduce inventory but reduce waste when they have unsold copies, right? And, they can they don't have to worry about, in the academic side of things, they don't have to worry about unsold books of one edition when the new edition comes out, etc. One thing that's been really interesting for me is hearing and seeing the Book of One production. Is that where you order a book on Amazon or on another service and it's printed on demand and shipped sometimes the same day? Is that something that you folks are looking at or in the middle of as well?
Well, we do it on a limited basis. So it's for Gasch, it's kind of a custom arrangement with a particular publisher. So there's some kind of catering that process to that particular publisher. Unlike a company like Lightning Source, which is owned by Ingram, where they're doing it for all their customers, and they're printing a 1 6x9 book followed by an 8.5x11 book, 1 color, 4 color, etc. We don't do that, but we do have relationships with customers where we're taking orders of one, printing it and shipping it to wherever it needs to go.
That's an amazing dynamic, and I think folks take for granted what goes into that process. To your point, you may be printing different size books, one after the other, so the ability to do a lot of repetitive process is not necessarily there as you might want in a manufacturing operation.
Right. Yeah, you have to. It requires a fairly sophisticated level of IT work, information systems, in managing the workflow and having the right equipment. So binders that can basically read a barcode and adjust the trimmer. So, as I said, you have one book that's 6x9 and 2 seconds later, you've got another book going into the trimmer that's 8.5x11 and fitting the cover to it and trimming it properly. It's a fairly sophisticated process. It's not something that everybody can do well. And but I think there are more and more printers moving in that direction, because more and more publishers really want that. They want to be able to, for a title that they want to keep a title alive in print, but it's only selling, pick your number, 10, 20 copies a year. POD is a great way to go. But on the other hand, they may want a few hundred because they're selling a few hundred every 6 months, and they don't want to put 3,000 in the warehouse, but they'll put a few hundred in the warehouse, go through that, and 6 months later print again. So I think the market in the last 10 to 15 years has evolved into more of a print to demand. What is the kind of sales velocity of a particular title, and then finding the right printing method to service that.
Interesting. And with the market is sort of absorbing that concept as you guys are doing well. If you had to predict, where the market's going to go or continue to evolve in that direction, what would you say you'd expect to see in the next year or two?
I don't know. I think I would say in the next year or two, I'm not sure there's a lot of change to see. But I think over the next 5 years or so, we'll see more POD, print on demand, more, I guess, um, tighter relationships between printers and warehouses. So in warehousing, I use that term intentionally. It's kind of a generic term is distribution, a distributor. But in our world, a true distributor is an organization that also sells books into bookstores for a publisher, as opposed to a warehouse that is storing books and fulfilling orders from all takers. And I think, but where that tighter integration, where the order is flowing into the warehouse, and there's basically some kind of algorithm or analytics saying, okay, this should be POD, and this particular title, based on the sales, should be printing 200 copies every 2 months. This particular title should go offset, and kind of managing that for the publisher. I think we'll see more of that.
Yeah, the technology is amazing, and the ability to connect your manufacturing workflow to the warehousing um, is pretty strong. But to your point, if you could use the analytics and some sort of machine learning or AI to make those final decisions about, educated guesses or forecasting on how much am I going to need in the next X number of days or weeks, that would be a phenomenal, development, I think.
It would be, because if you going back 20 years ago, there was a production manager or person at a publisher who was getting an inventory report and saying, well, we're down to X number of copies on this title, and let's print 1,000 or whatever the number was. And they would print it, and books get shipped in, and they're not necessarily, again, it was obviously not everybody, but in general, they weren't really tracking that how quickly they would replenish or needed to replenish.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think today, more and more production people are using analytics to better manage their inventory. A lot of that kind of went out the window, though, having said that, during COVID, because capacity, the supply chain disruption, it was very difficult for publishers to get books when they needed them. So they actually overprinted. Just like, if I can it's going to take me 6 months to get 5,000 books, I'll print 7,500 just to hedge
Right.
my bet. So that was very disruptive. And I think we're just beginning to kind of see the waters calm in that area.
Yeah, there's a lot of emotional action on both sides of the supply chain. Many printers bought more paper than they probably needed because they were afraid of being able to get it again, and the prices were high, et cetera. We've seen that in a few segments, and that's really kind of hobbled some printers that did it too much, I suppose. Um, but I think, wouldn't you agree that COVID in general was good for book printers because the volume of consumption went up, but it really resulted in a bit of an instability in the market that took a bit to correct, a couple of years, right?
It was I would say for 18 months, it was great for printers. Because for the first time in, I don't know, 20 years, there was more demand than capacity.
Hmm.
And uh, and so the kind of the tables turned. It, and I think a lasting, kind of a positive of that is publishers realized how dependent they were on their printers. And so I think it helped those relationships. Having said that, in the last year or so, we've kind of returned to there's more capacity than there's demand. A lot of publishers had onshored their four-color work that they were printing in Asia. That work has flowed back to Asia, a lot of that. So we've kind of returned to 2019 to some extent, but I think a lasting impact is that there were lessons learned by publishers. We need to manage our relationships with our printers with a long-term focus so that we never are out of capacity. And similarly, printers and our suppliers, our relationships with the mills is kind of the same way, as we realize we need good mill relationships, because if we go on paper allocation, we're not left out in the cold. So I think there's some positive emotional and business practice outcomes.
Yeah, like any major spike in the market, it takes you a bit to figure out what the new normal is. The unfortunate part, as I see, and you mentioned it a moment ago, is the offshoring of that work. I was kind of encouraged when you started to see a lot of it come back to the United States, but differences in labor rates, among other things, I guess, is what really driving that new offshoring that you're seeing again.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true, and I think we see it's labor rates, but excess capacity. Using China as an example, they have excess capacity. There is just this week talking to a competitor about how they received some pricing feedback on a four-color book that they were quoted on, and the competitive quote from China was less than their cost for materials, than the American printer's cost for materials. So that didn't even include labor.
Wow.
And it's just kind of hard to fathom, that how that could be, other than there's some kind of subsidization going on.
Yeah, exactly. That's the only explanation for it, really.
But I think that'll get sorted out over time, and it's kind of going back to what we were talking about, inventory management. It makes sense if there's a Dr. Seuss book they're printing in 25,000 copy runs, four color, where it makes sense to print that overseas. But if it's a book that they only printing in the low hundreds, it just doesn't. There was a presentation on shipping at the BMI meeting. You could see small quantity, low volume in terms of physical volume. Just there's not a lot of value to doing that overseas, and I think there seems to be an interest from publishers just to continue to print smaller quantities.
Yeah, maybe that's better for the domestic business, right? The smaller the
Yes.
quantities get, and the more the downward pressure on inventory, obviously,
Yes.
the more often that's going to happen, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That's terrific. So what else is going on at Gasch? Talk about some of the successful things you've done for customers recently, and what customers can expect from Gasch.
Well, if on the sales side, being a salesperson selling for Gasch, I think we can pretty much produce any kind of book. So four color text, one color, hardcover, softcover, spiral. So I think that for publishers that are looking for a printer that can handle publishers that have a variety of products, we're a good source for them. I think speed to market, we tend to be quick and reliable, and I think the feedback we get that our customers like is that we're just easy to work with. You can reach somebody. there's always, we're responsive. We take care of them, and so I think it's not really kind of sexy in the sense that it's some technological innovation. It's more just old school, taking good care of our customers is what we do well. And for kind of, well, what's a unique success story? I think we have a customer that does lab manuals in the higher ed market, and there's all spiral bound, and they're responding to enrollment. So they basically print to enrollment, and they need them. So once they get an order from a college that, well, we have 125 students in this chemistry class, they need books tomorrow for the students, and we've been able to take care of them. And it's, as you can imagine, it's the work comes in chunks. It comes in the summer, it comes in the fall to service the 2 semesters. So I think just being responsive and to particular customers is where we excel.
And I think that's the magic of companies like Gasch that are on the small to mid-size. I would say you're probably mid-size, really, on the spectrum of companies, because you're able to respond quickly because you have the right equipment, you made the right investments, but at the same time, you're not so big where you don't forget about your customers or they don't get treated like numbers. You provide a solution at the end of the day, and that's what customers need more than anything else.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, so the large publishers, your Penguin Random House, your HarperCollins, the bigger printers in the country take care of them and take care of them well. But you can imagine when one of those publishers needs capacity, they're going to get it from those printers. Whereas our customers would kind of go to the back of the line, and at a small to medium sized printer like Gasch, that doesn't happen. We pretty much take care of all of our customers equally as best we can.
Yep. That's it. That's all about solutions, right? It's that's
Yes.
the magic, and that's what keeps you in business at the end of the day.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Well, that's a good way to end the discussion today, Joe. I really enjoyed reconnecting with you and getting a chance to let everyone else know about the good things at Gasch. Um, Joe, tell folks that are listening how they can reach you and how they can reach the company.
Well, as you mentioned at the outset, Gasch is in Odenton, Maryland. I can be reached if you just go to our website, gaschprinting.com. There's a contact us link. You can find it, and just send us a message through that link. Said, I heard Joe Upton on a podcast. I'd like to learn more about the company, and that message will get to me, and I'll respond right away.
Terrific. Well, for those that joined a little bit late in the podcast, today we've had the chance to have a great conversation with Joe Upton, who is the Vice President of Business Development at Gasch Printing. So thanks, Joe. I hope you come back to the podcast and tell us about the new stuff that might happen in the future at Gasch and in your career. But in the meantime, this is Chris Santomassimo from the Think Factory podcast and OGC Solutions, and we'll see you next time.